When Judge Harrison took the bench that morning, he had no idea his courtroom would soon be at the center of a shocking and unprecedented turn of events. It started as a routine hearing, the kind he had presided over countless times before. Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, was in attendance as legal counsel for a high-profile client. The case involved a heated corporate dispute, and tensions were already running high. From the moment Bondi stepped into the courtroom, Judge Harrison seemed to have an attitude. His tone was sharp, his demeanor dismissive. As Bondi began to make her arguments, the judge interrupted her repeatedly, cutting her off mid-sentence and speaking over her. His irritation was palpable. "Ms. Bondi, let's not waste the court's time with unnecessary theatrics," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. Bondi, a seasoned attorney who had handled intense legal battles throughout her career, remained composed. She continued presenting her case, but the interruptions persisted. Then, the insult came. "Honestly, I expected a more competent argument from someone with your reputation, Ms. Bondi," Judge Harrison remarked with a smirk. A hush fell over the courtroom. Lawyers and spectators exchanged glances, stunned by the judge's blatant lack of professionalism. Bondi took a measured breath, refusing to react emotionally. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "I would appreciate being allowed to present my argument without unnecessary personal attacks." Judge Harrison leaned forward, his expression one of mock amusement. "Then perhaps you should present an argument worth listening to." At this point, murmurs began spreading through the courtroom. Even opposing counsel looked uncomfortable. The bailiff shifted awkwardly. It was clear that the judge's behavior was crossing a line. But Bondi, unshaken, continued. She meticulously laid out her case, backing it with evidence and legal precedent. The judge, however, barely seemed to be listening. He dismissed her points with a wave of his hand, rolling his eyes as if he had already made up his mind. Then, Bondi did something no one expected. Calmly but firmly, she placed her hands on the table in front of her and spoke in a controlled, "Now, Your Honor, I am formally requesting that you recuse yourself from this case due to demonstrated bias and inappropriate conduct." The courtroom gasped. A lawyer challenging a judge so directly was rare, but Bondi had every right to do so. Judge Harrison's face darkened. His arrogance quickly turned into visible anger. "You dare question my ability to oversee this courtroom?" he snapped. "This is my court, Ms. Bondi, not a political stage for your grandstanding." Bondi remained unfazed. "Your Honor, your behavior today has been unprofessional and unbecoming of a judge. I will be filing a formal complaint with the Judicial Oversight Committee." Judge Harrison stood abruptly. "You are out of line. I will not be threatened in my own courtroom." The tension reached a boiling point. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, in a moment that stunned everyone, Bondi turned to the bailiff and said, "Officer, I am requesting that Judge Harrison be held accountable under the law." The judge let out a dry laugh. "On what grounds? Because I hurt your feelings?" Bondi's expression remained resolute. "No, Your Honor. On the grounds of judicial misconduct, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Judge Harrison's confidence wavered for the first time. He looked at the bailiff, who hesitated but was clearly aware of his duty. Judicial misconduct was a serious accusation, and Bondi had the legal standing to challenge his authority. The bailiff stepped forward. "Your Honor, I need you to remain seated while this situation is assessed." The judge's face turned red with rage. "This is ridiculous. You have no right." At that moment, court officials entered the room, having already been notified of the escalating situation. A senior judicial officer approached and quietly spoke to Judge Harrison. His expression shifted from fury to shock as he realized the gravity of the accusations against him. After a few tense moments, the official made a decision. "Judge Harrison, you are hereby ordered to step down from the bench pending investigation." In the days following Judge Harrison's shocking removal from the bench, the legal world buzzed with speculation and debate. News outlets quickly picked up the story, with headlines ranging from "Judge faces investigation after clashing with Pam Bondi" to "Judicial misconduct exposed and explosive courtroom showdown." Bondi, as always, remained composed and professional, refusing to make a spectacle out of the situation. However, her legal team wasted no time in filing the necessary complaints and formal grievances with the state's Judicial Oversight Commission. The allegations against Judge Harrison weren't just about that one courtroom incident. Whispers of past abuses of power, bias in rulings, and judicial misconduct began to surface. Investigative journalists dug deep, uncovering a pattern of behavior that had long been ignored. Former defendants, attorneys, and even court staff stepped forward with their own unsettling experiences. One attorney recalled a time when Harrison had threatened to hold him in contempt for simply questioning a procedural ruling. A former court clerk anonymously revealed that she had witnessed the judge making prejudicial remarks about certain cases before hearings even began. As more testimonies emerged, the Judicial Review Board had no choice but to launch a full-scale investigation. Judge Harrison, once regarded as a powerful figure in the courtroom, now found himself in an unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable position, on the defensive. Meanwhile, Bondi remained focused on her case. Despite the chaos surrounding the judge's downfall, she maintained her professionalism, ensuring that her client's legal matters were handled with precision. It was a testament to her resilience. She had never been one to back down from a fight, especially when justice was on the line. Public reaction was overwhelmingly in Bondi's favor. Legal analysts praised her for standing up against judicial misconduct, noting that many attorneys would have hesitated to challenge a sitting judge so directly. Social media exploded with support, with hashtags like #Justice Prevails and Bondi Takes a Stand trending for days. But not everyone was pleased. Harrison's legal team quickly went into damage control, attempting to discredit Bondi and frame the situation as a misunderstanding. In a public statement, Harrison claimed he had simply been firm in maintaining control of his courtroom and accused Bondi of being overly sensitive. "She turned a simple disagreement into a media circus," Harrison stated. "This is nothing more than a politically motivated attack." But the evidence against him was mounting. As the Oversight Committee reviewed case after case, it became evident that this wasn't just a one-time issue. Complaints had been brushed aside in the past, but now, with Bondi's high-profile challenge shining a light on his behavior, those complaints couldn't be ignored. Behind closed doors, discussions of possible disciplinary actions took place. Some called for a formal reprimand, while others believed disbarment was necessary. The legal community waited anxiously to see what the final decision would be. Then, the bombshell dropped. After weeks of investigation, the Oversight Committee announced their findings. Judge Harrison had engaged in multiple instances of judicial misconduct, displaying clear bias in several cases, and violating the ethical standards expected of someone in his position. Their recommendation? Immediate suspension, with a strong possibility of permanent removal from the bench. The moment the decision was made public, Bondi's response was simple, yet powerful. In a brief press statement, she reiterated what had driven her actions from the start. "This was never about personal grievances," she said. "It was about accountability. The courtroom should be a place of fairness and justice, not intimidation and bias. No one is above the law, not even a judge." The ruling sent a powerful message through the legal world. It was a rare but critical reminder that those who abuse their authority will eventually be held accountable. As for Judge Harrison, his legal troubles weren't over. With his misconduct exposed, several individuals began appealing their past cases, arguing that his bias had unfairly influenced their rulings. Lawsuits were filed, and Harrison soon found himself not just suspended, but facing the possibility of disbarment and legal consequences of his own. In the end, the courtroom battle that began as an insult thrown at Pam Bondi had become something much bigger, a moment of reckoning for a judge who believed he was untouchable. And as she walked out of that courtroom, Bondi knew that she had done more than just win an argument. She had upheld the very principles of justice itself. As the legal firestorm surrounding Judge Harrison intensified, his once untouchable reputation crumbled. The Judicial Oversight Committee's findings triggered not only his suspension, but also calls for a full criminal investigation into potential abuses of power. The public, outraged by the revelations, demanded accountability. Pam Bondi, though satisfied that justice was being pursued, refused to be drawn into the media circus. While reporters hounded her for interviews, she remained focused on her legal work, letting the system handle Harrison's fate. But the ripple effects of her actions were undeniable. She had set off a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Harrison's legal team scrambled to mount a defense. His attorneys argued that he was the victim of a politically motivated attack, claiming that his so-called firm judicial style had been misconstrued as misconduct. However, with mounting evidence and witness testimonies against him, their defense strategy was weak at best. Then, another unexpected twist emerged. A whistleblower, one of Harrison's former law clerks, stepped forward with damning evidence. She provided emails and internal documents revealing that Harrison had intentionally ruled in favor of certain high-powered individuals and corporations in exchange for favors. The allegations of corruption sent shockwaves through the legal community. Investigators wasted no time digging into Harrison's financial records, uncovering questionable transactions and connections to influential figures with vested interests in his rulings. What had initially seemed like a case of judicial arrogance quickly escalated into a full-blown corruption scandal. With public pressure mounting, state prosecutors had no choice but to intervene. A grand jury was convened to determine whether criminal charges should be filed against Harrison. The possibility of bribery, fraud, and obstruction of justice charges loomed over him like a dark cloud. Harrison, once defiant and dismissive, now appeared visibly shaken whenever he was seen in public. The confidence he had displayed in the courtroom that day when he insulted Bondi was long gone. He avoided the press, his legal team shielding him from direct questioning. Meanwhile, other judges and attorneys in the legal system took notice. The case became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even those in positions of power were not immune to scrutiny. The judicial branch faced increased oversight, with state officials pledging reforms to prevent similar abuses in the future. As the case against Harrison moved forward, several of his past rulings were called into question. Defendants who had suffered under his biased judgments petitioned for retrials. Some even filed civil lawsuits against him, arguing that his corruption had cost them their freedom, finances, and livelihoods. In an ironic twist of fate, the man who once wielded absolute authority over the fates of others now found himself at the mercy of the same legal system he had manipulated for years. Months later, after an exhaustive investigation, the grand jury finally reached its conclusion. Harrison was formally indicted on multiple counts, including judicial corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The once powerful judge now faced the real possibility of prison time. As the news broke, Bondi was asked for a statement. True to form, she remained measured in her response. "This isn't about personal victory," she said. "This is about ensuring the integrity of our legal system. No judge, no public official should ever be allowed to abuse their power without consequences." Her words resonated across the country. What had started as a courtroom dispute had become a national conversation about judicial accountability. In the final chapter of Judge Harrison's fall from grace, he appeared in court, this time not as a judge, but as a defendant. Gone was the arrogance, the smug demeanor. As he stood before the bench awaiting his fate, he finally understood what it meant to be powerless before the law. Justice, after all, had prevailed, and it had all started with one woman's refusal to be silenced.